Good morning. Today we will delve on the appreciation of literary arts, exploring a poem that masterfully tackles themes of defiance and freedom, which is very relevant as we recently celebrated our Day of Independence last June 12. The poem in focus is titled Prometheus Unbound, written by the esteemed Filipino poet Jose F. Lacaba under the pseudonym Ruben Cuevas. Let me first read the lines. I shall never exchange my fetters for slavish servility. This is better to be chained to the rock than bound to the service of Zeus. Aeschylus Prometheus bound. Mars shall glow tonight. Artemis is out of sight. Rust in the twilight sky colors a bloodshot eye. Or shall I say that dust sunders the sleep of the just? Hold fast to the keep of fire. I am rage, I am wrath, I am ire. The vulture sits on my rock, licks at the chains that mock emancipation's breath. Reeks of death, death, death. Death shall not unclench me. I am earth, wind, and sea. Kisses bestow on the brave that defy the dump of the grave, and strike the chilled hand of death with the flaming sword of love. Orion steers. The vulture retreats from the hard, pure thrust of the spark that burns, and bounds, departs, returns, to pluck out of death's fist a god who dared to resist. It's important to note that the poem is actually continuously without additional stanzas as depicted in this very slide. This uninterrupted flow hints the historical and cultural context that inspired the poet in this art. The poem draws its inspiration from the ancient Greek myth of Prometheus, the titan who defied the god Zeus to bring fire to the humanity, symbolizing enlightenment and progress. Lacaba extends this myth, resonating with the themes explored by the English Romantic poet Percy Bysshe Shelley in his own Prometheus Unbound. By doing so, Lacaba connects classical literature with contemporary political struggles. Prometheus Unbound was published in 1973 during a turbulent period in Philippine history marked by the imposition of martial law, which was implemented in 1972. This era was characterized by censorship, repression, and the curtailment of freedoms. Lacaba's use of pseudonym was a strategic choice to protect his identity and ensure that his powerful voice could still be heard. Let's go back to how the poem is written. Mars shall glow tonight. Artemis is out of sight. The poem begins with the imagery evoking turmoil and decay, which references to Mars glowing and Artemis being out of sight, setting a tone of conflict and uncertainty. The vulture sits on my rock, licks at the chains that mock emancipation's breath. The speaker here describes the presence of a vulture on the rock, symbolizing the oppressive forces that loom over them, and the leaking of chains that mock their captivity. As the poem progresses, it delves into themes of defiance and resilience, with the speaker proclaiming the refusal to be subdued by death and identifying with the elemental forces of nature, earth, wind, and sea. As said, death shall not unclench me, I am earth, wind, and sea. Meanwhile, the imagery of kisses bestowed on the brave and defiance against the dump of the grave highlights the courage and determination of those who resist oppression. The poem culminates in the message of hope and triumph with the steering Orion symbolizing the awakening of resistance and the retreat of Vulture signaling the eventual decline of tyranny. So from the line Orion steers, the Vulture retreats from the hard, pure thrust of the spark that burns, unbounds, departs, returns. The imagery of the spark that burns and the plucking of death's fist portrays the resilience and ultimate victory of the spirit of resistance as it dares to defy oppression and liberate those who have fallen victim to its grasp. To pluck out of death's fist a god who dared to resist. So overall, the poem serves as a poignant tribute to the courage and resilience of individuals who dare to resist oppression and offering a message of hope and inspiration in the face of adversity. Now that we have an overview of the poem, now what then is its literary form? This is actually an acrostic poetry, which is also a powerful ode to resistance and the powerful human spirit. Looking back on its historical context, Prometheus Unbound came out in Focus magazine in 1973 at the height of Marcos martial law. It was a time, as said, when political dissent was forcibly silenced. But in this poem, a slogan was creatively disguised, one which voiced out the sentiments of many Filipinos rising in the protest of lost freedoms. The editors actually did not immediately realize or see that the work was an acrostic poetry, whose first letters spelled out the popular protest slogan, Marcos Hitler Diktador Tuta. In terms of literary tradition, this poem by Ruben Cuevas is intricately related or linked to Percy Bysshe Shelley's work of the same name. Percy Bysshe Shelley's Prometheus Unbound is a lyrical drama that reinterprets the myth of Prometheus, the titan who defied gods or god Zeus to bring fire to humanity, and subsequently suffered punishment as we know. In Shelley's version, Prometheus is ultimately liberated from his torment by the power of love and the triumph of human spirit over tyranny. Here, Cuevas' poem continues this narrative, picking up where Shelley left off. It likely draws inspiration from Shelley's themes of defiance against oppression, the pursuit of freedom, and the indomitable spirit of humanity. By referencing also to Aeschylus' work, which Shelley also drew upon, Cuevas' poem establishes a direct connection to the classical Greek tradition and to Shelley's own reinterpretation of it. Kumbaga, nauna si Aeschylus and then from that na-inspired si Percy Bysshe Shelley, and ito namang si Ruben Cuevas na-inspired from the works of those two great men. The poem also exhibits characteristics of modernist poetry such as its use of allusion, vivid imagery, fragmented structure, and symbolic language. Meanwhile, the use of acrostics in this poem is drawn from medieval literature where acrostics is used as a clever way to hide messages or pay tribute to patrons or their saints. They even appeared on the original Hebrew text of Old Testament, particularly in Psalms or Proverbs. Classical literary examples of acrostics also include an Ode to Anne Elizabeth by Edgar Allan Poe, together with some works of Lewis Carroll, such as The Little Girls, Lorena, Alice, and Edith, and his poem in the ending chapter of Through the Looking Glass titled A Boat Beneath a Sunny Sky. So, in terms of literary movement, during the martial law, under Ferdinand Marcos, there was often increased censorship and control over the media and artistic expression. The literary works that emerged during martial law are often classified as resistance literature or literature of protest. These works typically reflect the political climate of the time, with themes of oppression, censorship, resistance, and the struggle for freedom and democracy. Writers often use their works to criticize the government, raise awareness about social issues, and inspire resistance against authoritarian regimes. Some notable figures associated with the literature of protest during these periods include Luwalhati Bautista, who wrote Dekada 70, Primitivo Mijares, who wrote The Conjugal Dictatorship, which was one of the books that is banned during that time, Ismael Bernal for Manila by Night, which is a film, then Carmen Navarro Pedrosa, who wrote a book about the untold story of Imelda Marcos, and also the song Bayan Ko by Freddy Aguilar. To truly appreciate its depth and artistry, we will use the SWIFT framework to examine its literary elements and devices. S stands for sound devices, W stands for word choice, I stands for imagery, M stands for figurative language, then T stands for themes and tones. For sound devices, one notable aspect of his sound devices is euphony, which is the use of harmonious and pleasant sounds to enhance the poem's aesthetic quality. Lacaba employs sound devices such as alliteration, assonance, and consonance. Alliteration, which is known as a literary device that involves the repetition of consonant sound at the beginning of the words in close proximity. It is depicted in the line, or shall I say that thus sunders the sleep of the just, where the sound S is repeated 4 times from the word shall, say, sunders, and then sleep. We also have assonance, which is a literary device that involves the repetition of vowel sounds within words in close proximity. For example, the repetition of the E sounds like emancipation's breath, breaks of death, death, death. We also have consonants, which is a literary device that involves the repetition of consonant sounds within or at the end of the words in close proximity. So unlike alliteration, which focuses on the initial sounds of the words, consonance occurs within the body of words. For example, the sound of R and T in the line, Orion steers, the vulture retreats from the heart, pure. We also have other sound devices such as paronomasia. Paronomasia, also known as panning, is a literary device in which words are used that sound similar but have different meanings. In the line, Mars shall glow tonight, the praise phonetically resembles martial law tonight, suggesting a connection to the theme of oppressive rule and control. In the line, or shall I say that thus sunders the sleep of the just, here, the word sunders sounds similar to thunders, right? But it means to separate or divide. This creates a pun-like effect as the speaker is playing with the sound of the word to convey the idea that thus disrupts or divides the sleep of the just. We also have anaphora and parallelism. In rhetoric, an anaphora is a rhetorical device that consists of repeating a sequence of words at the beginning of neighboring clauses, thereby lending them emphasis. For example, the repetition of the word I am. We also have parallelism. Parallelism is a rhetorical device in which a writer or speaker uses similar grammatical structures, phrases, or patterns to express related ideas. For example, the repetition of the word rage, wrath, and iron. Here, the repetition of I am creates a rhythmic and emphatic effect, emphasizing the intensity and power of the emotions being expressed. It also serves to unify the three emotions under the speaker's identity, reinforcing the idea that they embody these feelings completely against those who perpetrate injustice. We also have episioxis. Episioxis is also known as polylogia, which is the repetition of a word or phrase in immediate succession, typically within the same sentence for vehemence or emphasis. For example, in the line, pigs of death, death, death. In this instance, the word death is repeated 3 times in immediate succession for emphasis. This repetition conveys an overwhelming presence of death. In terms of word choice, the poem is marked by symbolism and metaphor, rhythmic and musical language, and also emotive language. In terms of imagery, the poet employs vivid and descriptive language to create imagery that evokes strong emotions and visualizations in the reader's mind. For example, in the line, Mars shall glow tonight, Artemis is out of sight, rust in the twilight sky, colors of bloodshot eye is an example of a visual imagery. We also have a kinesthetic imagery which depicts movement. For example, in the line, the vulture sits on my rock, licks at the chains that mock. Orion steers, the vulture retreats from the hard pure trust of the spark that burns. I've also included synesthesia, which is a literary device that involves the blending or crossing of the senses, where one type of sensation is described in terms of another. For example, in the line, reeks of death, death, death. This line creates an imagery of sound of mournful wails, thereby creating a sensory overlap that enhances the emotional impact of the phrase which describes the word death. In terms of figurative language, we have analyzed 3. We have allusion, personification, and mythology. So in allusion, the poem contains an allusion to Prometheus Unbound, which is depicted in the beginning of the poetry, where the poet alluded it to the Greek tragedy of Aeschylus' Prometheus Unbound, which is a play that tells the story of Prometheus, as said, the titan who defies Zeus, the chief in the Greek mythology, by stealing fire from the gods and giving it to humanity. We also have personification in the line, "Kisses bestow on the brave that defy the dump of the grave and strike the chill hand of death with the flaming sword of love." In this line, kisses are given the human ability to bestow themselves upon the brave. This personification implies a reward or tribute, adding a layer of emotional depth and a sense of cherished valor to the theme of bravery. We also have metonymy. So here, in the line that defy the dump of the grave, which is the physical place where the dead are laid to rest, is used to represent death itself. The dump adds sensory detail that evokes the cold, lifeless nature of the grave, enhancing the metaphorical representation of death. In terms of theme and tone, for the theme, the poem echoes the defiant spirit of Prometheus, who challenges the authority of Zeus and refuses to bow down to tyranny. It explores the theme of rebellion against oppressive power structures and the courage required to stand up for one's belief. For the tone, throughout the poem there is a passionate and determined voice that refuses to be silenced by oppression and injustice. But in times, the tone is confrontational as the speaker directly challenges the forces of oppression and tyranny. There is also a sense of anger and indignation underlying their words as they rail against the chains that bind them and the vulture that torments them. However, this anger is tempered by the deeper sense of purpose and resolve, as the speaker remains steadfast in their commitment to freedom and resistance. So despite the darkness of the subject matter, there is also a note of hope and resilience in the tone of the poem, which is depicted in the last few lines. Overall, all I could say is this, that through his masterful use of classical references, vivid symbolism, and a passionate tone, Lacaba creates a work that not only resonates with his contemporaries but also offers timeless insights into human condition. His ability to embed powerful political commentary within a rich poetic framework underscores his significance as a literary figure committed to both artistic excellence and social justice. Thank you so much for listening.